I grew up in New England, and my background and training is in the areas of psychology and sociology and organizational psychology. And after college, I was drafted in the Army in the Vietnam era. Thank God I didn't go to Vietnam, but I worked in the neuropsychiatric wards of Army hospitals and was exposed to group therapy at that time and just fell in love with the power of group, and got me into this training that I eventually got into. Later on, I studied Jungian psychology, which deepened my appreciation for psychology in general and introduced me to spirituality. After that, I continued to deepen in my work and my training and study, and decided to become a spiritual director and trained and got certified in that. And it's pretty much what I've been doing for the last 8 years, although it is a combination of things. It really is the Jungian work and the spiritual work and the just overall depth psychological approach to healing and working with others.
I grew up in the Midwest. I'm the youngest of 5, and I had 2 older brothers who were ministers, and in my family you either were a minister or a teacher, and I became a psychologist and have worked in the field for 25 years, clinical psychology, mostly focused on depression and anxiety and addictions. I've done some work in the business world through the years, worked at, did an EAP, directed EAP for several years, and then most recently I've been doing more hospital work. I do evaluations in a hospital. But my interest has always been in spirituality and psychology, and mostly that has manifested itself with working with addicts in recovery. I've always been interested in the 12 steps. That has a personal element to it as well as my family. There's a lot of addiction in my family and people in recovery. And mostly what I've tried to do is find some way in doing therapy to have a spiritual element.
Tell us about Soundings. What is it?
Well, if you look it up in the dictionary, soundings, the definition of soundings, it is both discerning the depth of water, right, but also giving utterance to something. And so when you put those things together, that's what John and I are trying to do, is to give utterance, to help people give utterance to their lives in deeper ways. And so that's how we sort of came up with the name of our practice.
Is it just for Christians?
No, that was something we gave a lot of thought to. I mean, that is our orientation, but the basic place we want to work from is a 12-step place, which is, it doesn't make a lot of sense for somebody to come into doing group work where it's specifically based on a higher power. Who that higher power is, I mean, we refer to it in our literature as the mystery we call God, and that basically is a stance we want to take, that it's a mystery. And within the 12-step framework, that's referred to as the God of your own understanding. And I think both of us agree that, God is big enough to handle whatever your belief system is. But probably you need to have some belief system.
Right. What I would add to that, and that's great, John, what you said there, some belief system, but it is not religious, it is spiritual, what we're doing. And I would like to make a distinction with that. Religions pretty much have to do with the idea of God. Spirituality is the experience of the mystery that we call God. And that's where we're oriented. So the religious tradition, though it informs our spirituality, is not really important to us from the point of view of which one it is. So we are open to, all faiths, but as John said, some foundation, some ground out of which people are coming from, we have found is very helpful in doing the work.
How is this unique or different from typical psychotherapy?
Well, I would say, first of all, when you say psychotherapy, you know, it's like saying religion. There's like so many different kinds and so many different approaches to it that, you know, we can get lost in the definition of what we mean by psychotherapy. That being said, this, if we were to categorize it, I would call a depth psychotherapy. We are interested in depth. And so some of the modalities like Jungian analysis, existential psychotherapy, you know, Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, they're moving into places that are combining, not combining, but are integrating really psychology and spirituality. You know, when we talk about psychology and spirituality, they're all in the same soup, so to speak, psychologically. I mean, where do we separate, you know, really? But what we're aiming at is more depth, more meaning in people's lives, more opportunity for healing with something beyond ourselves. And so that part is unique, the spiritual focus, where we are really looking to something beyond ourselves for growth and healing.
In some ways, it's like talking about soul work. I mean, in that, you know, at least in my experience and my belief, is that probably the deepest place of existence is the soul, and we don't understand it, and we don't necessarily know psychologically what that means, but when you say soul to somebody, they sort of understand. We're talking about heart, we're talking about feelings, but we're also talking about the sort of things that Al brought up, like existential questions. Why are we here? Who are we? You know, what does our experience have to do with who we are? And, you know, we're talking too, I think, from a psychological place about childhood injury sometimes, trauma, dealing with those things that restrict our expression in the world. There's a definition of spiritual direction which I love, which is about becoming more of oneself in order to be a freer expression of God, and that's, you know, that's what differentiates it. I think that's what separates it.
Who do you think will benefit most from Soundings?
We've talked quite a bit about that, actually. The type of person that we're looking for is someone who's searching for something more in their lives, and someone who is at a level of development that is mature. Ideally, it would be great if we had some people that have had experience in therapy and or extensive experience in a deep kind of spiritual direction, people who have done their work, in other words. Because putting those kind of people together really enhances the process. You know, we're also looking for people who are suffering in one way or another, with a lack of direction, with depression, with anxiety, with having to live in a world that seems to be chaotic and crazy, and perhaps a world that they feel they don't belong very well in any longer. These are the kind of people I think that really can benefit from the kind of work that we offer.
Yeah, hopefully part of what we address is isolation. That people who are not feeling that connected have maybe done their work in the past. And again, I think it's important to recognize that we're not looking for people who are in acute crisis, but people who have an idea about what it is to do therapy or 12-step work. It could work with somebody who's been in recovery for a while and has gone through the steps a couple times and is looking for, you know, that taking that next step developmentally. But really, part of what the group provides is an antidote to isolation, separation, that sense of being alone, and providing some community for people who are looking for that kind of connection.
For somebody who's never done group therapy, what is that like?
Well, imagine that you're in a group, not a therapeutic group, but just in a group. Say it's a social situation, and you're interacting with people. There are some things that you're sharing about yourself in that group, and there are some things that you're not sharing in that group. Also within the group, people know some things about you, and they don't know some things about you. And what happens here is that as you share yourself more, and as each person does that in a group, they have this profound opportunity to get to know some things about themselves that they don't know. And so this is one of the great things about group. It's what I just described, by the way, is something you might call something that's known as the Johari window. Things I know about myself, things I don't know about myself, things the group knows about me, things the group doesn't know about me, and so on. But there's this area where we have an opportunity to learn some things that heretofore we did not know about ourselves. And
when somebody's in group, first of all, we're going to be looking at people who can tolerate a certain level of anxiety, because there is a certain level of anxiety starting in a group where you don't know people. But one of the things that happens, like Gail said, is there are multiple feedback loops. So if you come in to see me as a therapist, there is a feedback loop between you and me. And mostly as a therapist, I'm not going to be revealing all that much information about myself, but that feedback loop that I, in some ways, hold up a mirror for you, that is the therapeutic action. That's what starts the healing process. Well, if you take that dynamic and now you add 6 other people, and you have all those relationships happening, and in some with some group therapy theory, you might have somebody that reminds you of your mother or your brother or your father. But it doesn't have to go that way, but sometimes it does. And you have all these different dynamics. There's such a rich tapestry of interaction that goes on, much beyond our capacity to understand, but we do our best. And that process has an incredible healing action. And then you take that process and you add the idea and the belief in a power that is also healing, and I think that's where the excitement in the work will be. So if you're a person who is looking to do some depth work, and by that we mean you're at that time in your life where you're ready to look at yourself, you're ready to look at your relationships, come to the website. Look at the different modalities. There's spiritual direction, there's spiritual psychotherapy, there's depth work. Call us. Let's talk about what you need. Let's talk about the direction that your unique path is pulling you. We hope at some point that you will choose to do group work, because it is the most powerful and the potentially most enriching modality that we offer.
And we always begin with both John and I talking individually with everyone that comes to our practice in whatever way you just described there. And so we'll be able to answer your questions and your individual questions to see if this is the right thing for you at this point in your life.